Hello, I'm Jeff, and welcome to the 10 Revolutions podcast, where we have conversations with the disruptors improving life on Earth. In today's episode, our host Mark is interviewing Wongani from Transition by Design, an Oxford-based architectural firm. They are a worker cooperative focused on regenerative architecture. In this episode, Mark and Wongani talk about community wealth building, sustainable building materials, and interrailing in Europe. Let's get into it. Hey, Wongani.
Hey, Mark.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks. Yeah.
Great to have you here on the podcast.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it's great to be here. And it's great.
Sorry, go on.
It's been a while, yeah. It's been good that we finally get this happening now.
It has. It's taken a while to organise, but I really appreciate you coming down.
Yeah, no, that's right.
I guess revolutionaries are busy people.
Yeah, that's true.
So normally I start the podcast by talking about how we got to know each other and how we met. I just thought with you've been on quite an interesting trip recently. I thought it'd be a great place to start. Was just talking about you've been on a rail trip from I've got it here: Oxford, Cologne, Stockholm, Falkenberg, Copenhagen, Hamburg, Ghent, and then back to Oxford.
Yeah, yes.
All by train.
All by train. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's just links back into how. My journey, I guess, around sustainability and thinking about, just trying to think about the environment and being climate conscious. So as a family, we have family abroad. My wife's from Sweden and I'm from Zambia. So we're always traveling and usually flying around. And we've been trying to think, how do we actually reduce our sort of carbon emissions? And one of the ways is thinking about rail travel. So we had a really fun time over the summer. We've got 2 young kids where we traveled to Sweden, first for a wedding, and then we stayed with family for a couple of weeks before traveling back to the UK. And we did that all by rail, which was fun. So the last week of travel on the way back, we actually made a holiday out of it, going to each of those stops, the west coast of Sweden, Copenhagen, Hamburg, and Ghent, which was really, so lovely.
Oh, some amazing cities. Do you know how many miles you covered in total?
Oh, I don't know miles actually. Oh, actually, it's over 1,000 miles, definitely. It was, I think it was close to 2,000 kilometers. So definitely it's over 1,000 miles. So it was a lot of ground that was covered.
Yeah. And so with your 2 young kids, what age are your kids now?
They're 5 and 2. Yeah.
5 and 2. Okay.
Yeah. So it was, it was a real adventure. Yeah, it's easier to occupy the 5-year-old. The 2-year-old was everywhere.
2-year-olds are pretty much a handful, on there.
Yeah.
Well, you've done well there.
Yeah.
And how? So I think I read that because you've written a travel blog about this, haven't you?
Yes.
So,
Yeah, so I wrote a travel blog, with Interrail. So basically we used Interrail passes to be able to do this travel. And that helped us have the flexibility. But then, it was really great. We just got in touch with them and they, suggested writing this blog, which was great. So it was actually nice to get it all down on paper or on the internet, and people can actually see that journey if you want to have a look at it.
Yeah. So it's on the Interrail website.
Interrail, the Interrail website. And I'm pretty sure if you search the Interrail magazine, then you will see, I think we're one of the first links there. So you'll find the Scandinavian travel.
Nice, yeah. I did some of this. I didn't go by rail. I flew. So I did a similar trip probably 10 years ago now, nearly. So at the time, similar. My daughter was 8 months, and my son was would have been just about turning 5. So not dissimilar.
Yeah.
To you, probably to 2-year-olds, a bit more of a handful.
Yeah.
It's So we flew to Copenhagen, and then we travelled to Stockholm, to Helsinki. We did the ferry.
The ferry,
to Estonia.
Yeah.
Back again,
oh wow.
And then back to Copenhagen. That was really interesting. And I think what you were talking about was it revolved a lot around play areas for kids.
Yeah. And I think that's something I was fascinated about is, we have to just occupy them anyway, and the kids love to be in the playground. But also, they're just amazing designs, especially in, I think the thing about Denmark with a lot of their playground spaces or play spaces is that there's a lot of trust. It's a sort of trust-based society. Yeah. And I think that's also how they've shaped their playground design is also around sort of risk and enabling children to learn the boundaries of play. And and I think it's really fascinating because, there's this whole thing, even linking into the shared economy, there's this whole There was this park where there were hula hoops, footballs, everything was out there. I couldn't imagine a park like that in the UK because all those things will probably sadly get stolen or vandalized. But for whatever reason, things seem to work over there with that, and having a sort of park where you can rent out a bike for free and the kids cycling around. It's just amazing, really inspiring to think of what can be possible in a society.
Yeah, I remember some pretty awesome parks there. And of course, you've got Tivoli Park, haven't you?
Yes, yeah.
Is it the second oldest park in the world?
Something like that, yeah. We've not yet gone with the kids. I think we'll wait until they're a little bit older, but we've been before the kids, and we really loved it.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, so, yeah, I've read that blog, yeah, so, I've done some, I wrote a story about my travels in India, so, yeah, maybe, is that, I guess, I'd quite like to publish that at some point. Maybe not on there. I have to find the right outlet for it. All right. Well, let's talk about how we got to know each other then.
Yeah.
So we both occupy the Makespace building, which is in Jericho in North Oxford, and just the Makespace building. The ground floor is a co-working space. They run. Have events there. They've got a pottery studio. They've got a recording studio, and then upstairs you've got your organisation, Transition by Design, and quite a few other. How do you call them? Local enterprises.
Yeah, local enterprises, social enterprises, community sort of centered organisations. Yeah, a whole range of different businesses, really. Purpose-led businesses is probably the best way of saying it.
Yeah. So, and you were involved in the inauguration of the space at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, yeah. So, as Transition by Design, so I sadly wasn't there at that time. I've been at Transition by Design for the past 5 years, but this is about 7-8 years ago. We, as an organisation at that time, were thinking about or trying to find a new space to be in. At that time, I think Transition by Design were housed in a different building in the city centre, and we're trying to find sort of new affordable workspaces. And they came across this issue with several other purpose-led organisations that they knew of who also are struggling to find affordable workspaces. And I think, I don't know all the details and the ins and outs, but in essence, long story short, they were able to come across a sort of building that was owned by one of the colleges that had been vacant for a few years or several months as well, and approached them to think about this building, this space could be utilized for sort of community benefit, to think actually how could we maybe repurpose this building to house different organizations. Went through negotiations to try and work out how it could look like. And in essence, the college thankfully agreed to this idea of using a meanwhile space. So the idea of meanwhile use is that when a building is vacant or empty for a certain period of time, you as a client or as an individual might approach that building owner to say, oh, it's almost a win-win situation. Could we have this space at this sort of affordable rent? And therefore you're keeping a building which would otherwise maybe get vandalized, derelict, and in use, and then bringing it back to purpose. So that was the story around sort of 2017, 2018, bringing this building that we now have as Makespace Oxford. And originally Makespace was just a project within Transition by Design. And then obviously as time grew and as they needed more staff, and actually as now they've acquired several more spaces, it became its own entity, its own sort of separate organization. So we're very much still like project partners on different things, but it's great to see the growth of Makespace since then as well.
And that building secured for, is it another 4 or 5 years or so?
I think it's something like that. I think they signed a 5-year sort of release last year or 2 years ago. So there's still several years to go with that, which is great. And I mean, they first thought that it would be probably 3 years or so that they would have the building, and now it's sort of in year 7, I think. Coming up to year 8, which is amazing. So it really shows. I think it's evident of the fact that actually meanwhile use can be a catalyst for sort of more permanent, longer term spaces, and there's been evidence of that across the country of how meanwhile use is actually translated into sort of longer term, long leases for spaces, and even in some cases purchasing of buildings as well.
Great. So tell me about your evolution.
Yeah.
What's your evolution in your words?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in my words, it's I guess the revolution is thinking about how do we activate your citizen, your individual, your person who's living within a city. So I'm going to use Oxford in this case. How do we use them to have them realize their full potential within the city, within their context? And we do that a lot through community engagement, but we also do that a lot thinking about social justice and environmental justice. So through a social justice lens is to think about sort of the inequalities within the city, across the county. How do we address them? Thinking about that through a sustainable lens as well. So whether that's through affordable housing, thinking about garage sites, which are some of the projects that we do at Transition by Design, is working with the Community Land Trust to bring affordable housing. But then also thinking about the climate crisis, thinking about how do we actually make existing homes more sustainable, and existing buildings and repurpose buildings to be sort of used in the longer term as well.
Okay. And your company's Transition by Design. So you describe it as a workers' cooperative, and it's female and black led. What does that mean to the layperson?
Yeah. So workers' cooperative is in essence, a cooperative is an organization that is democratically owned by its members, and it involves sort of collaborative decision making within its members. So even to break that down further, what that means is anyone who is employed at Transition by Design can become a member. And once you are a member, that means you actually have a say in how the organization is run in the day-to-day. And also we all own the organization as well. We own the way, just how it functions in essence. And there's many different ways it works, but for us at Transition by Design, we're not for profit. So it also means that we actually don't have any sort of individual stakes or any sort of we don't really personally benefit necessarily financially from the organization, which I think is really important for us. We're a CIC, community interest company. So everything that we're doing is in the interest of the wider public benefit. So it is quite a different way of working, but I really enjoy it because in essence, I guess if you take what's different to it from a traditional organization is that usually you'd have your director or your CEO who's making all the decisions, and then the workers are informed of all the decisions. Yeah. But actually, everyone who the people who are the workers are the ones who own the organization, which I think is really important, which you don't really see happening in the mainstream. The ones who aren't really doing the day-to-day groundwork aren't the ones who are making the decisions. It's the people who are above them who are usually doing that.
Yeah, it sounds like a great model for any company, I think. I mean, do you all own equal shares in the company?
Yeah, so there's no shares. Shares. Yeah, so it's a limited. Yeah, So there are no shares in the company for Transition by Design, as in for us as individuals. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're limited by guarantee, and it's a in the way that we operate, there's an asset lock to the organization. So if the organization were to one day sort of fold or were to close the company, then all of our assets will be transferred to another entity, rather than I guess us sort of moving with the assets or the things that we own as the organization.
Yeah. Okay. And you recently won an award, or you were front runners for the Regenerative Architecture Index. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's really exciting. It's this initiative that Architecture Today started last year, where they have been looking at the built environment and the way that architecture and also actually wider professions are engaging with really interesting regenerative work across the country. And Architecture Today decided they wanted to recognize that work that is being done. So they started an index last year, which was really sort of successful. And this year they did another relaunch. And I think it looks like it's going to be an annual thing of them creating this index every year and updating the index. So we applied for it this year, and we're really successful and really proud of the fact that we are a front runner in the category of creating a just space for people. And I think that recognizes our community engagement, but also our way that we've engaged with community-led housing and thinking about addressing some of the issues in Oxford and Oxfordshire as well. So it's really, it's great because I think in essence, regenerative practice aligns with the sort of sustainability agenda and thinking about how we can actually be sort of even thinking about other themes like community wealth building and aspects like that, which are really important to make sure that we're doing as a practice.
So yeah, and I mean that sounds fascinating. It sounds like community led. So it's engaging with the community, the people who are actually going to be occupying the buildings,
Yes,
having their say
yeah.
in the design, right?
Yeah.
So to bring that to life a little bit, have you got an example of one that?
Yeah, so there's a project which is really exciting now because it's actually soon going to be on site. It's 31 net zero carbon homes. So we work together with Tame Community Land Trust, who are a local organisation based in Tame, just outside of Oxford. And we actually worked with them from the very beginning. So by them being community led, it means that everyone who was involved in that project from the beginning at that stage were local residents who were interested in actually having affordable local housing for them to meet their needs in that area. So by being community-led, it's not just doing a consultation, which you might do for any project, where you'll tell people this is what's going to be happening and these are the designs. We're actually involved with the client team or with the group from the very beginning, from the brief setting stage. And that's what we say is really important. Actually, that's the foundations of Transition by Design. So the co-founders, Alex Towler and Andy Edwards, one of the key things they've always sort of emphasized was work stage zero, which is basically when you're doing a project in architecture, there's 7 different key work stages, and work stage 0 is the strategic definition phase. So that's the very, very beginning of trying to think about what are you going to do, even just before you set the brief. And I think that's where community-led design is most impactful, because actually, if you're already involving the community at the very beginning, then you get all those insights. So, for example, with Tame Community Land Trust, getting the insights of the fact that there are people who are struggling to live and work in the same area, so they're having to commute in from areas outside, or that there aren't enough sort of 3-bedroom property homes that are affordable for families or young families in the local area, or that there is an aging population who are also not able to afford to downsize and to live within Tame itself. So how do we meet all of those needs with sort of new housing scheme? And that's sort of some of the challenges that we take in with community-led is actually we get some unique insights by involving people who might live there or who are local to the area throughout the design process.
And what about the actual space as well? Because if you go to some city centres, you look at, or some urban developments, they're quite depressing, aren't they? There's a lot of concrete and the layout is not great. Whereas actually it's been proven that you can design a space and actually getting people involved in that design. So how does that look in that sense?
Yeah, I think that's why there's this whole idea of sort of place shaping and placemaking is really important to think about. Actually, how do we not just think about that in housing, but actually how do we think about in the way that our towns and our cities are? That does get a lot more complicated than the housing question, because with community-led housing, it's quite tangible and easy to see. And with, for example, Tame Community Land Trust, they were able to purchase the land and then actually be able to be involved in that process. But with something in the city centre or a town centre or even a village centre, there's all sorts of different ownerships and different stakeholders to be involved with. So it gets a bit tricky. But there are really interesting initiatives, like I've kind of already mentioned about Make Space Oxford, and there was a Meanwhile in Oxfordshire programme, which was £2 million fund from the Oxford City Council and other project partners, and we were a project partner with Make Space Oxford to think about how do we reinvigorate, I guess, these empty and derelict retail units across the county for purpose-led organisations. And that was a really successful scheme where over sort of 25 different buildings across the county were brought back into for purpose-led businesses. Over 200 jobs were created. And that was just through reactivating retails and units across the county for different purpose-led organisations. But it's really, that's a sort of once in a, I don't even know. Well, it's a rare opportunity to have that sort of project which is really exciting. And one of the things we're really keen for, and I think even Makespace Oxford would agree, is more of those sort of initiatives to bring back these spaces. But also the trick or the question is also, how do we bring public ownership into that question as well? And that's the one thing that we've been talking about and thinking about as we've engaged with different grassroots organizations in Oxford, is community ownership. And I think that's something that a lot of people are trying to push, especially for spaces that are shutting down, like music venues or pubs or other spaces which have been well used by the public but are struggling. Can they be brought back into community ownership to make sure that they're still maintained rather than knocked down and developed by someone else who may not have the community in their interest?
And where do you think, in terms of the profession as a whole, the architectural profession, do you feel like you're the exception? How do you see things changing? Because I guess if you look at the last 100 years, we've got a lot of dull buildings, haven't we? And I see lots of positive change in the profession. How do you see it in terms of? I think we've got these buildings which are all designed very sort of designed with a ruler, and I guess it was it seems to be that started around the turn of the last century.
Yeah.
And then obviously you had the war and the reconstruction, and that put pressure on building more homes under time pressures. Where do you think the profession is as a whole in terms of embracing more sustainable materials, community-led design, and all these things that sound really positive?
Yeah, I think it's slowly getting there. It's sadly slowly, but it is getting there. There are more and more. I was actually reflecting on this because I wrote a piece for the Architects Journal in the student sort of edition, and one of the questions that they asked about is like, as an architect, what do you think? Where do you think the profession is going? What has changed since when you were studying? And I think one of the things was, I remember when I was doing my undergrad, that there were only a handful of organizations that I kind of saw as doing the similar sort of work that we're doing at TBD. And at that time, I think TBD just started. So I think I do see a trajectory of architecture practices having more and more of this social focus, community-led focus. Like, there's some things that have really changed, even in the last sort of 10 years, has been having more and more community engagement embedded in projects. Yes, a lot of it still is sadly tick box exercises, but you'd struggle to find any major development that's happening now in the UK that hasn't involved the community at some stage, even if it's only just been one or two consultations just before submitting planning.
And that's at stage 0, as you describe it?
Well, actually, that's more stage 3, sadly. Okay. But stage 0 is what we would still want to push for, is more people involved in stage 0. So I think that's changing. And then I think the sustainability agenda, partly also because of regulations, is changing as well. More and more regulations that are, in terms of building regulations, that are asking for better sort of quality in terms of insulation, and other things around solar shading that have been put into place in terms of building regulations, have meant that we already have to design in some of these elements. It doesn't push as far as going to, say, passive house, which is a standard in terms of construction, where you'd have minimal amounts of sort of heating in a home, for example, in the winter. It doesn't push to those standards yet, and I don't think it will happen in the next sort of 5 to 10 years to go to that sort of standard. But things are slowly moving in that direction. So the profession kind of has to do that anyway. We can't get away with just sort of building a concrete building without sort of with little insulation. We have to actually think of how we operate these buildings well.
Yeah, no, because there was an exhibition. Did you go to that? There was an exhibition at the Design Museum in London.
The Design Museum, yeah.
Did you go to that?
Which one? Well, there was one I went to about a year ago, but I'm not sure if...
It was about, a lot of it around the use of sustainable materials in construction.
No, I saw that one. Yes, no, that was, definitely. And I think that's really, it's great to see more and more of that happening. And even in Oxford, there's been quite a movement, and even across the country, even the Southwest, I think there's a few different organisations that have been having more workshops and getting more of the public involved with engaging with sustainable materials. A lot of that, I think, is just getting people on board to realise that actually these work well, because we're also used to seeing a red brick or concrete and thinking like, oh, this is the sort of what we aspire towards. But actually, if more and more people get used to seeing that actually timber construction is fine, and that you can actually have a safe timber building that won't burn down, and that actually straw bales and other sort of natural materials can actually be used in a building, I think the more that we can get the public on board with that, and also developers or sort of community-led organizations, the better for everybody, really.
Yeah, those were the exact two things that sort of stuck in my mind. Was the use of timber instead of concrete.
Yeah,
and obviously, reinforced fireproof timber.
Yeah.
But actually, yes, people's initial reaction will be, okay, well, that's timber. We're felling forests, but actually, it's the carbon's locked up in the building for centuries.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you compare timber to concrete, if you look at the footprint of concrete, it's horrendous, isn't it? But I guess people don't realise that.
Yeah. And that the construction industry is one of the worst polluters actually out there. So in terms of, when we think of building, but also in terms of demolition, because of the amount of demolition that's also happening, and then rebuilding again, there's a lot of waste and a lot of emissions through construction itself.
I think in the US, it's something like an area the size of Washington, D.C. is demolished every year and rebuilt. And is that just concrete as a material? It just doesn't last as long as if you build it with reinforced timber or use other materials?
I mean, it can last long, which is also sometimes some of the argument is that, it can be quite a durable, long-lasting, structurally sound material. But it's just the materials that are involved in the excavation and the use of natural materials as well. It's just, and the emissions through producing the concrete itself. It's something else compared to timber. So we do sort of need to move in that direction.
Yeah, it's emissions, isn't it? It's the sand that has to be dredged from riverbeds and things. It's once you start to peel through the surface, it's quite eye-opening. And the other one you mentioned, obviously, was insulation and using materials like straw. I mean, you think of all the agricultural waste that's produced every year. Yeah, 90% of it, I guess, is waste material, isn't it? Yeah. And it's been, traditionally it would have been burned. So actually tapping into that is.
Yeah, there's a lot of innovations that are happening right now in terms of thinking about waste materials that can actually be repurposed for construction. And I think that's really exciting to see. And what the challenge, I guess, there is how do we upscale it? But once we're able to do that, it's pretty exciting. And I think we need to have, there are more and more projects that are sort of innovating in that space. We're not yet really seeing it as much in the, I guess what you'll see in many of the architecture awards. Those projects aren't yet sort of engaging with all of those sort of materials. But I think it's starting to happen more and more. And I think even some of your more large commercial practices are starting to embed some of the natural materials a bit more, which is the direction that we need, is basically to convince the clients that actually you can trust these materials, they'll be good for you and good for the people that will be using your building.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love that. Yeah, I love the community aspect as well. The idea that probably for too long we've relied on experts, inverted commas, to dictate our lives, whether that's in politics or education or just in within the company. I think you're embracing that through the way transition by design is run, but also these projects that you're involved with. Actually, there's a lot of expertise in the people that consume the spaces, and it's fantastic that you're tapping into that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we always do whenever we're doing a community engagement in a project. We actually start with saying, we're not the experts, you are the experts, because you're the ones who live in the area, you know which streets you walk down, you know where the kids have to play, you know where to get the good food and to meet with your friends. So help us to think about actually how can this space suit your needs and how can it fit within the existing fabric of your community.
How did you get into this in the first place? Was there a source of inspiration or a moment that
it's an
awakening moment?
It's a good question. I think I've always been inspired since beginning my studies in architecture to think about how can architecture be used with a social purpose as well. So even when I was doing my undergraduate, I think I was really inspired. There's someone called Joe who started an organization called Azuko. When I was in my first year of architecture. So they're a charity based in the UK who've done a lot of work in Bangladesh and other countries. And I was really inspired to think, there's someone who's qualified as an architect and they started a charity which is doing some work across the world and really inspiring other people. So that was, I think, one thing that sparked my interest, thinking like, this is interesting. I've never seen this before. I've just heard of architects building all these glass towers. And then I think slowly through then that interest sort of translated into seeing more and more projects across the world, and then starting slowly to see also more and more practices based in the UK doing interesting things. So I did my part one. Well, basically, it takes a long time to become a qualified architect. But when I came back again to do my master's in architecture at Brookes, I went to do it because I wanted to do the first year of my master's with the CENDEP, which is a Centre for Development and Emergency Practice. And there I did 1 whole year looking at development and emergency practice and thinking about how we can engage with human rights, thinking about shelter after disaster, all these important issues that are happening globally and now even locally in terms of thinking about flood resistance and overheating and all these issues that we have in the UK as well. This actually ended up being more relevant than I thought, some of the things locally. So yeah, I think all those things have transpired and inspired to where I came. And then of course, eventually landing at Transition by Design, where it's just in the ethos of the organization, being able to actually marry my interests and actually my practice at the same time has been great to actually be able to do that in practice, because I know it's usually tricky to find a space where you can work, where you can actually pursue those sort of ambitions and interests.
And before you did your undergrad, so when did you decide that this is what you wanted to do? Was there a moment when you had this?
I think around 15, 16, when I was looking at what options I might do. Actually, I was either going to go through doing IT, so going down the IT route, or I was going to do creative sort of architecture route. I'm glad I decided on architecture. But I think I've been inspired probably actually from just deep within in terms of my heritage, my family. My parents built their first home when I was a child, and we lived in that home until I was 5. So, probably maybe psychologically that process might have definitely been deep embedded, and they have also built sort of a further home since then. And my granddad, who my father's father, was a bricklayer as well. So maybe that's sort of in the family roots, thinking about construction. So there's probably been small moments throughout my life that have hinted at that. I've always, obviously, as a kid, just loved Lego. That was one thing that I always loved, the idea of creating space and how you can shape spaces. Playing video games. I always loved the different video games that you could play where you could actually create spaces as well. So I think there's all these small things that I take for granted that actually slowly inspired where I've got to. And both my parents have worked in sort of more social purpose, I guess. Or my dad has been a water sanitation specialist. My mum's background is a social worker. So they've both been working in spaces that have been thinking about human interactions, or thinking about how we can enable them to live well by having clean water. So I think those things have probably inspired me as well.
And you're from Zambia, so were you born there? You grew up in Zambia?
Yeah, so I was born in Zambia. I was only there until I was 5, but I was born in Zambia and then lived there for the first 5 years of my life. But all my extended family is still there, grandparents, aunties, uncles, cousins. So it's good to go there every once in a while as well.
Yeah, but it sounds like between Zambia and Sweden, it's quite diverse.
Have you been that side of the world to Zambia?
I haven't yet.
Yes, you should.
Yet. Okay, so a few other things. So the podcast. Tell me about your podcast. So you hosted a RIBA podcast on circular economy as well.
Hey listeners, just to explain, RIBA stands for the Royal Institute of British Architects.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah. So that was so as the RIBA, they have this thing called the RIBA Futures, and we were looking at the topic of the circular economy and had this really engaging, interesting discussion where we were thinking about how, as a profession, can we be engaging with the circular economy more? The project based in Cambridge, which had a lot of ambitions in terms of reusing materials. And that was quite an innovative project, I think linked with the University of Cambridge. And that was really exciting. And then also Duncan Baker Brown's done some work in Brighton with the Waste House, which was a really innovative project, I think over 10 years ago now. And where they used a lot of materials from things like toothbrushes to old jeans as part of insulation and different materials. so it was really engaging conversation to think about actually how do we think about reuse of materials. There's a lot of really positive, interesting things about both of the projects they've engaged with. But then I think a lot of the challenges we also discussed is how do we standardize and how do we actually get on board with doing this at scale? Because I think some of the challenges, for example, like the Waste House was a sort of research project, which was the site was in the university. So it could kind of test those boundaries and test those limits. But there's all sorts of problems around building regulations. How do you make sure that you get the building signed off, and planning, because you have to have your planning drawings and sites and dimensions. So if you're going to reuse windows or doors, you have to make sure that you actually already have that in mind, what sort of size of spaces you're going to be creating. But anyway, it was a really engaging discussion. I think it should still be online through the, I think I'm pretty sure if you search RIBA Futures Circular Economy podcast, it will probably pop up. But there's a really interesting discussion thinking about how do we think about the circular economy in architecture, because there's so much going around. I'm even looking at the space that we're in. There's lots of materials that I'm sure probably have got scraps of species from different places, or if they're or materials that could be reused. Yeah.
I will check that out for sure. So what gets you out of bed in the morning? And what keeps you awake at night? 2-part question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think getting me out of bed in the morning, or besides my kids
besides the alarm clock and your kids, they're waking you up at 5 a.m.
My kids. I think there's a few things that inspire me. I think in terms of the work that I'm doing at Transition by Design, I think that's. I think I do get inspired by thinking about that. I also teach Oxford Brookes, so that's one thing that also does sort of inspire me in the week, is the students that I engage with and thinking about their futures and the work that they're doing. My kids, obviously, they inspire me, and I'm thinking about their future as well. And a lot of the work that I'm doing is thinking about how do we change the future and how do we change how we live. And I think all those things sort of inspire me. I think I also do, like, in terms of my background, I also do have a sort of faith. And I think for me, one of the things that inspires me through that is thinking about the idea of, like, considering others better than myself. So thinking about how do I actually, how do I embody that in my day-to-day? How do I not just think about my own interests, but to think about others as well? And I really like this other principle that someone's shared with me of being satisfied with enough and generous with the rest. So in my day-to-day living, what does it look like to actually be satisfied with enough, have gratitude, and think about being content, but then also being generous with the rest of what I do have. So if I do have excess, how can I be generous with that? If I have expertise, how do I be generous with that? If I have certain skills, how do I be generous with that? So I think those are the things that get me out of bed, but also inspire me in the day-to-day, especially when it's sometimes tricky when you look at political climates, or you think about, are we really making an impact when only 1% of building in the UK is self-build or community-led? Those things inspire me.
We love that quote from Wongani about being satisfied with enough and generous with the rest. A lot of people aspire to putting others first in that way, but how many of us actually live it? Question for us to consider. Let's get back into it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this podcast is about. It's about amplifying voices, people who are doing amazing things, but perhaps still a little bit under the radar.
Yeah.
So this is exactly what this platform is about.
Yeah, definitely.
And things that keep you awake. Does anything keep you awake at night other than your kids? Things you worry about?
Yeah, things that I do worry about. I mean, I do worry about. Being honest, I think that it's the sort of trajectory of the social. The division, I guess, that we have right now in society. I mean, it's probably something we could talk for ages about, but that does keep me awake sometimes, thinking like, are we going to move past this division? How can we reunite people to have a common goal and a shared vision? Because I think at the end of the day, we all have the same struggles. We're all thinking about the cost of living. We're all thinking about how can we sort of live well and be, content in our day-to-day. That at the root of it, I think that's there, but we all have different information that's being fed to us that led us to different conclusions of how we solve that. And I think that's something that I still get sort of caught up about, especially when I think about that with the intersection for myself personally of race, but also thinking about, the intersection of sort of migration and all these other topics which, affect me personally, but also are dividing our nation in a way.
We're getting more polarized.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And on a lighter note, you're still doing park runs?
Yeah,
Are you still doing the running?
Yeah, still doing the run. I actually just did the rugby half marathon on Sunday, which, my legs, I think today are now back to functioning again.
Oh, wow. That's a bit more than a park run. That's 4 park runs,
Four
right?
park runs, 4 park runs and a bit. So it's, so that was good, actually. It was my first time doing a smaller scale half marathon. I've usually just done big city ones, like the Oxford Half or Great North Run and Reading. So it was quite nice doing a smaller one, but mentally more challenging to get yourself going when there's no one cheering you on.
Yeah,
but
well done.
But I do love doing the park run, and I run it with my 2 kids in the buggy.
You're still doing it with the buggy?
Yeah, with the buggy,
the double buggy?
With the double buggy, yeah.
And how much longer is that going to go on for?
I don't know, probably only 1 more year, maybe a year, maybe 6 months even. They're getting bigger.
Yeah, we'll get them coming around with you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, actually, I do the junior park run with my daughter. So which is 2 kilometers on a Sunday.
Is that the? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's the bubble race as well. Have you done that?
Oh no, what's that one?
It's great fun. So I think it's 2.5K.
Yeah.
So you could run around it twice to do a 5K. And you run around it, and then you go through these gates, and they like spray like different coloured pink, blue, green
great.
Bubbles at you. So don't wear a white t-shirt. Otherwise it'll be permanently stained. But I did that with my daughter and my son when he's a bit older. But so she didn't like it, so she was on my shoulder. So I ran around the 2.5K with her on my shoulders.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Have you got any other runs coming up or anything that you?
No. So the marathon happened this year.
Yeah,
I think I saw you when I was doing the town and gown. But I've hung up the running shoes for the time being.
Yeah, but you should do the town and gown again next year. I'm going to be doing it.
Okay.
So hopefully we can see you there.
Let's do it. Great. Anything you want to ask me?
Oh yeah. Good. I guess what inspires you? What gets you out in the morning, or like what keeps you awake at night, and what's inspired you with this podcast as well? I'm interested to.
I think I just touched on it then.
Yeah.
I think it is just the idea that if you look at the mainstream media, if you look at the news, it's quite depressing. It's quite sensationalist. There's a lot of division and polarization in society, as you see. But there's a lot of positive stories out there, and this podcast is going to shine the spotlight on 10 of them. But I think that's only the tip of the iceberg, and hopefully we can inspire a whole movement to change the way we live, as you say, be more united, focus on things that are going to make a positive difference for society and for the planet. So that's certainly what inspires me with this podcast. Is I actually believe it's never been a better time to be alive today. I mean, I work a lot with youth. I'm a coach, newly qualified coach, and my focus is very much on Gen Z, under 30. And I think it's very easy to be overwhelmed or feel despair or anxiety in terms of everything that's going on in the world today. But if you, at a community level, at a citizen level, there's loads of positive things happening. So I think if you can tap into that, if you can avoid the distraction, it's never been easier to connect with anyone around the world. It's never been easier to learn something online, or even finding a space like a make space, like they have actually they have a maker space in our building.
That's true.
Where you have like they have a laser printer and things like that. So those kinds of resources are available at your fingertips. You could be a school leaver, or you could be doing your studies, and you could start a business, and you could design and prototype something and launch it at it's very, very low cost, like a fraction of the cost you'd be able to do something 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, that is true, actually. Yeah.
So we're very well connected. It's just, if we use those connections, and if we use the power that we have in the palm of our hands in the right way, then we can do very amazing things. But it's very easy to be distracted. It's very easy to be polarized. It's very easy to feel despair. So it's really about taking the right path, and I guess that's what I'm trying to encourage through this and through my other pursuits.
Yeah, well, that's great. No, that's really inspiring, because I think, especially, thinking of Gen Z, and I think the potential there's a lot of potential, especially with technology, but also their passion. I think what's different with them is their passion for, I guess, their activism, their nature in being very active in activism and being socially conscious, I think, is something that's really interesting in that generation as well.
Is that something you see through you teach at Brookes University, right?
I definitely see that. Yeah, I definitely see that more. And I think even most of the students that I've taught or am teaching now have that sort of consciousness of thinking about how architecture affects people in the day-to-day. I think if you probably went to architecture schools maybe even 10, 20, well, maybe 20 years ago, it would be a lot more of the focus of, we're trying to move away from the whole idea of the star architect. So they're having an architecture practice that's run by an individual who's this amazing star, who's got this inspirational vision. Because at the end of the day, everything is actually collaborative. No architecture project is done by one architect. There's contractors, there's planners, everyone involved in the process. So actually the key thing is actually they're really interested in that idea about collaboration and learning from others and being really sort of socially conscious in the way that they practice as well.
That sounds inspirational. Great. Any final words?
I guess just I think it's been really interesting having this conversation, and I think there's I'm really excited to hear about what your other guests have to say as well, because I think there's a lot of potential right now, like you said, actually, and it's really important to think about how we can actually use that potential for good as well. So I think it's been a really inspiring conversation. Yeah.
Thank you so much. You've been a great guest. I've really enjoyed learning from you, and wish you all the best.
Yes,
and I'll see you in the building next week probably.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation and for being here.
Thank you very much, Wongani.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the 10 Revolutions podcast. Particular thanks to Ollie and Stan and the team at Cowley Road Studios. At the 10 Revolutions, we're creating a movement, supporting people who don't necessarily get a lot of coverage. There are good news stories in the world, and we're here to help promote the people who are writing those stories. One of the things we've noticed through these conversations is that when humans want to make a positive impact on the world, they can't do it on their own. Please join our movement via Patreon to support future content and to engage with the community, including the podcast guests. The details are in the show notes. And a final ask from us. Please share this episode with 5 people that you think would be positively impacted by it. Thank you for helping us to grow the movement.